I suspect the original response is to be like, oh my God, well, lots of choices. What kind of an issue is that? Now I've gone from having the problem of, oh my God, I can't be a professor because there's not enough jobs, to there's all these possibilities and I don't know what they are, and oh no, muddle, muddle, muddle. This is, of course, a better problem to have. Too much choice, always better than too little, okay? So, instead of thinking it as the big muddle and that thing, we'll think about it as paths, okay? This is you, right in the front here. There are a lot of paths that you could go. There's directions you could take from here. There were all kinds of different directions you took to get here. Each of you has come here on a different path, and you could go in all kinds of directions from here. And the nice thing about thinking about paths is, see, we don't know what happens to some of those paths when they go over the hill. They could go all kinds of places, and we don't have to know. We can still think, well, this is a kind of interesting path to go on. They also branch off. Some of them loop around and join other paths. So you can head off down one path, and that could be because you kind of had to make a compromise. The thing you really wanted to do wasn't quite available, but this other thing looked interesting, and you'll do that for a while, and this is where we'll see where we end up. And sometimes you can end up back on another path. There are plenty of people that come into academia after a career in another area, for example. Right? You've already got the PhD, you have the basic qualification, maybe you go off and then you get excited and you're doing other things and you end up back. Maybe you go off and you're like, why did I ever even think that was where I want to go? Maybe you end up in academia and you like it, you get the tenure track job, and that takes you in an interesting direction, but there's also paths within that, right? Like, what kind of an academic? There's all kinds of different ways you can be an academic, okay? It's not just one thing. So what you're doing is you're setting out on a path that's going to take you somewhere. And your whole life, you're going to be on a path. So heading down a path, even if you're not quite sure if it's going to lead any place interesting, might lead to another interesting branch in the path that will lead you, right, in interesting places. Places you can't see from here, okay? So the first thing to figure out is what those options are, okay? So if I said to you, well, what kind of options, as you started listing job titles, most of us will start with stuff like doctors, lawyers, teachers, judges, police officers, firemen, nurse, you know, maybe not when we're grown up, but when we're little. And the reason that we come up with those things is because those are jobs that we run into. We've been to the doctor, right? We know, we can think of who works in that office, right? This is a picture of downtown Ottawa, just, you know, but any old downtown. Imagine any picture, downtown Toronto, downtown Fredericton. There are buildings like this. Downtown Toronto has even more of them. There are hundreds of people working in those buildings. I have no idea what they do. You probably have no idea what they do, okay? Many of them are very smart people. I think this one might be, is that the Canadian Press building? Those people might be journalists. Beyond that, I have no idea what these people do, okay? There's a whole bunch of people in offices. Some of them will be lawyers and accountants and other things we've heard of, and some of them will do other kinds of jobs. We don't even know what they are. They might be really, really interesting jobs. Those might be really smart people in there doing really interesting and exciting things that you would love to do. And the problem is, so the problem with this is that those buildings right now are kind of over that hill. Though actually they're not really over the hill, because we could find out more about what people do. So the first thing to remember is the reason that it feels like this totally impossible task is because most jobs that most people do don't come into direct contact with the public all the time. There's all kinds of jobs that you don't, unless you happen to have run into them and somebody happened to tell you what they did, you have no idea what they did. Do you know what your best friend's dad does all day? Any idea? Ever talk to him about it? Know what kind of people he works with? What they do? He might do something really, really cool. Okay? And he's like a really nice, friendly person who actually likes you, right? So if you asked him really nicely, what's your job, by the way? He might actually tell you, okay? I actually, with a colleague of mine, one of those ex-murderers I met on the internet, we ran a course called Conscious Career Course. We do it with teleconference things. There's information on that full handout. And one of the things we get people to do is to actually talk to somebody about their job, right? Just ask somebody. So one of the women, she has a PhD, she's been working, she actually had a tenure track job, she didn't like it, she switched to just doing teaching, she's trying to look for something else. She's geographically limited. She lives in one of those flat places in the middle of the US. And she's like, well, what can I do around here? I live in this small town, I can't, I've got a small kid, I'm married, blah, 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 I can't go anywhere. I'm like, well, you should talk to the people you meet at the Ball Diamond or whatever. Anyway, so she, for the exercise where we got her to talk to people, she actually she talked to her dad, and she talked to her cousin, both of whom work in sales. And she was like, oh, but sales, sales. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna go and talk to them and ask them what it's like. And she came back to the next call and she's like, wow, that was really interesting. I learned a lot. This might be a possibility for me. But like, both of those people were people she knew really well. And she just said, look, I just want to know more about what it is. Can we just talk about what it is that you do and what that involves and what you like about it and all that kind of thing. Now, it might be you talk to somebody and what they like about it, you're like, oh my God, that would drive me crazy. And that's useful knowledge, right? But it might also be, oh, I never knew anybody did that, right? I didn't know that that was what it involved, right? So some of it is just finding out. And we all know people, okay? We all know people who know stuff about what happens in those offices. Maybe not those offices, but some offices. And if you don't want to work in an office, then you probably know some people that work somewhere where they aren't in an office all day, right? Like that they're out in the woods or they travel all the time. If you like to travel, then there's jobs where people are traveling all the time. Personally, I would prefer not to be traveling all the time, so I don't do that. But other people love it. Anyway, so what you need to know to find this stuff out is you need to do research. This is very good because all of you know how to do research. In fact, you're better at research than most people in the population. It's just that, so all those skills that you use to figure out whatever it is you do your research about, you can use those skills to figure out what you could do with your life, okay? So there's different kinds of research. You can do the kind of looking on the internet and figuring out what's out there, okay? And sometimes one of the things is we think, oh, well, I have to know what I want to do before I can go look at job listings. But actually, you know what? You could just go look at job listings. You could go, oh, that looks like a neat job, or that looks awful, or whatever. You could think about companies, right? You could read the business section or skim the business section or something, right? And think, well, that looks like an interesting company to work for, or that looks like a company that would drive me insane, right? You can just find, and then when you find a company that you think, oh, they seem to be doing really interesting things, I wonder what kind of people work there, you can go to their website and you can find some sort of an org chart and figure out what kind of people work there, right? Maybe professional organizations, maybe you're thinking, well, I might like this kind of a job, and maybe those people have an association, and you can go look up and find out stuff from their association. But the other thing you can do is you can just talk to people. Now, you'll find a lot of information out there about what we call information interviewing. And when you kind of narrow it down to kind of, well, I think this might be a good job, that's a really good way to find out more, right? To go and actually talk to people that do the job and say, well, what does that involve? Like, what do you do all day? That kind of thing. And it's also a really good way to find out, well, this is what I've done. Do you think that would prepare me for this? Like, I know it's not the normal route into this job, but does it seem like I have some things that might work? That's a really good thing. But you're probably at a stage where you haven't even got that, right? We're in the muddled brain stage.